Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 22 of Into the Rift. As always, I'm your host, Daniel Dracos. I'm joined tonight by a wonderful panel of coaches. First up, of course, John RNG Law Crichton, the coach for Dignitas EU. And then our special guest for the night is going to be Matt Schmieder, who is the coach for NA Team 8, currently 7-7 in the standings. And then the last coach is my personal life coach for Heroes of the Storm, Stephen Nguyen.
Since when was I the coach? I played like one game with you.
I'm trying to make it like a coach theme, and I didn't know how to include you, so I'm just giving something random that people can't really check. But thank you for throwing that out the window. All right, Heroes of the
bus.
I coach people in Puzzles and Dragons. You can mark that down.
Puzzles and Dragons coach or Final Fantasy 14 coach.
There's a
way.
lot of demand there.
Yeah, people really need Final Fantasy coaching. It's very important. All right. So we're going to be talking about a couple things tonight. We're going to be talking about coaching in general, coaching theory, a lot about Team 8 and Team 8's recent performances, and of course a little bit of a preview for IEM Katowice. And we're going to start right off the bat with Team 8, 7-7 record in the previous, or now, as of now, a 1-1 week most recently. Taking a game off of Liquid, doing quite well in that one, despite you voicing you're not 100% satisfied with the game. I thought it went pretty well. And of course, TSM, an interesting game overall, kind of saw the power of Lissandra, and definitely TSM looking very coordinated in that instance. But so let's talk about Liquid first. Going right into the game, what was the key to your success? What needed to come together for you to beat Liquid, and what was your plan going into the game?
Well, what needed to happen for us to beat Liquid? I guess I'll address that first. Our approach, when we talked about game planning, our approach would be, well, Quas clearly has been a huge playmaker and a huge part of the success for that team, more than probably any of their other players. And he has a huge champion pool too. Like when we faced him, he had this huge streak of playing 8 different champions in a row or something crazy like that. So it's not possible to ban him out for sure. So what we could do is limit what he could play to a certain pool and be prepared to respond to that. What also kind of needed to happen for us to win was I think you'll see that in a lot of our wins, Slushi did well in mid lane. So him getting LeBlanc and getting going on that with if I recall, it was a counter gank that got him the first kill. Mm-hmm. And after that, he just outplayed Phoenix constantly the whole game.
Yeah, and I believe he got solo kills on Quas in the top lane.
Yeah, that well too. That was more Quas's mistake, but it obviously helped us. So that was our thought going into the game, and it kind of played out that way in Champion Select. But then the early game, we might have misplayed it a bit, but Team Liquid did give us some room to gain advantages through the mistake you mentioned, Quas at the turret dying randomly, and Slushi generally beating Phoenix across the board, which was, I shouldn't say surprising to me, but I didn't expect that it would be that one-sided in the mid lane. Mm-hmm. So that was a big help. And even then, it didn't help us snowball the game crazy. It allowed us to be in a somewhat controlling position, but even still, you saw a lot of even vision dancing for a long time in that game. So it was still okay.
And it seems right off the bat you knew that you needed to get Slushi ahead. Is that something you communicated to Porpoise, or is that something that Porpoise knows innately from your experience playing? Because Porpoise, at least from what I saw, Porpoise spent a lot of time in the mid lane or focusing on the mid lane.
Yeah, I mean, I don't tell him what to do, and that wouldn't be a one-dimensional way of where to go in the early game, because that wouldn't be smart. He's not, he knows what to do himself most of the time, so letting him feel out, he apparently has this knack for counter ganking, and else I know he can counter gank, but he's had a really good streak of having good sense or maybe playing off vision in terms of counter gank. So I don't see any reason to limit what he can do, or even if it would be smart to. It wouldn't be smart to.
And it looks so one thing I wanted to talk about is obviously, so you guys had a pretty solid lead throughout most of the game, and there were a couple, mostly the team fights went very well in your favor, and we had this one team fight in Liquid's jungle on the blue side that went south pretty quickly, and it looked like it could have been a Cali Trolls Rumble ultimate that didn't quite hit enough people, or it could have been something else. What was your thought on this team fight? What changed here that stopped the team from winning out, or what failed in the execution for you guys?
So I would probably say there were two parts to it. It's not a fight we wanted to take, and then the fight was played badly. The more important being that it wasn't a good fight to take, because if I recall correctly, that was a fight where our side waves were huge, and like Porbus had actually snowballed the bottom wave really well, so that both of the side lanes were actually going to force them. Did we have mid inhib at that time? Possibly, maybe not, but in any case, those waves demand like they were needing to clear them. So if we were just patient, we could have either like controlled Baron or pushed mid or whatever was the case. And instead we got impatient and looked for a fight, which we probably thought it was going to be like a catch, but it didn't end up that way. And then the execution of the fight, I believe Porbus Vi ulted the Zed, which wouldn't do much, and then the Rumble ult wasn't super effective. And then Dodo did not use his Janna ult to ult away Quas when he ulted, and Quas was probably able to get onto our back line, so we lost that fight. Yeah.
And you guys came back pretty quickly, though. You'd been taking dragons all game. You were up to 4 around the time this fight happened. And despite Liquid getting Baron, it seems like you were able to win a team fight very close, having only 2 members left, and then get that 5th dragon. And that 5th dragon like let you win the game pretty commandingly. Do you think as a team that you rely on things like the 5th dragon or the Baron buff to end game, or do you feel more confident in ending the game just whenever you have a lead or whenever you have an advantage?
Without giving too much about like a style or anything, I think our style, but it's more often like mid game, I guess, than like waiting till dragon. I would call that more of like a gravity style, waiting till 5th dragon, where we're often trying to end in mid game. You saw that in a bunch of our other wins. But besides winning in mid game, like that doesn't always happen. I guess we're relying on team fighting mostly, and in that regard, all that's important is that we lay out what we have to do in a team fight. And in that game, it was very clear. Like I kind of said some of these things before champ select or in like after champ select, but some of them were probably quite obvious to the players. Like Janna has to deny Quas from getting into the team fight. Slushy has to stay on like the flanks and be threatening Piglet. He can't get caught up in their front line. He has to be hitting carries. And in the course of the game, like Phoenix wasn't relevant as a carry as much. There were like a QSS and 2 Zanya, so Piglet was his priority target, and in that last fight, he was able to finish off Piglet, and Janna was able to deny Quas from getting in on Kennen. So it was a lot of like team fight conditions.
Yeah, it's exciting to see Team 8 execute so well in team fights, especially from my perspective, because it seems like a lot of the win streak that you guys were on was due to team fight proficiency, and I mean also I think some pretty solid pick and ban phases, and of course execution as well. But team fighting in general, I think, is something we don't see enough proficiency of in North America, and it's good to see a team that prides themselves on it and is always looking to improve it. Steven, did you have anything to add?
I was just gonna ask in the pick bans for that game. They banned Maokai, but I know he didn't do that well in the pro scene with Maokai or Kalatros. But was it just like a lot of scrim records with like positive results with Maokai, or what?
Well, that was their ban, so I can never really know their motivation, but that's hard to say, because I remember Jack commenting like how Cali was like ineffective on Maokai or something, but I think that was overly harsh. Like, yeah, we lost 2 games on Maokai and we didn't quite use the pick as a team correctly.
Okay.
So in that way, it is weird. Like from what Liquid sees, I don't recall if any scrim in the past they saw us use it in some way or something, but for them, it was kind of hard to see why they would ban Maokai.
Okay.
I never thought about it that much, so if I thought about it more, maybe I would see why, but not really sure.
So, moving forward, TSM, the second game of the day, or the second game of the week, a little bit rougher, a little bit different. Obviously, you guys didn't come out on top in this one, and a very strong pick, or a strong pick ban phase from both sides, in my opinion. But some things went wrong. And so, I mean, what happened in this game? Because, you guys started off pretty strong. It seems like you came into it planning to shut down Dyrus, and it seems like you did so. And then things went south. You looked confident in the early game, and as we transitioned into mid, you looked a little lost.
Okay, so I guess the most reasonable place to start, I could start even earlier, but that would be like excuse territory, and there's no point in that. So in pick and bans, you said it was like kind of even, but I think we did kind of pick wrong. Like we kind of changed our plan for the picks late into the process, and maybe I didn't think it through as much as I should have, and the end result was a comp where they're probably more flexible in the lane swap. They have arguably a better team fight. Our late game team fighting basically would rely on Orianna ult, and that's not super reliable. Like, yeah, historically, like when we won against TSM, it was basically off the back of our strong team fighting, and like Sushi's shockwaves were amazing that game. But like that's not gonna happen. I don't want to have to rely on that happening every game to win. And looking back at that, it was probably a mistake. Like there were in our approach to Prick Ban, there might have been mistakes in that game, and so like the Gragas and Lucian Janna picks are like every lane could have gone okay for us in a vacuum, like a standard lane, but we ended up not ever like searching for a 2v2 or 1v1, so that was a mistake. It made it basically pointless to pick some of those picks.
Yeah, I was curious with the Lucian pick. He's seen a lot of nerfs. Obviously, he's still ridiculously powerful in those small duel situations. Was your goal to get the 2v2 lane off right off the bat, and you just
Yes.
ended up pushing it against Iris?
Yeah, that was the goal, but we didn't end up doing it. So that's something we all kind of acknowledged after the game, and it's something we'll work on in practice, like our early game lane assignments and how to correct that.
And I think that's one of those things that's tough for a lot of teams is utilizing the picks correctly, and adapting on the fly, especially because, I mean, I think a couple times we've seen teams so determined to 2v2 lane that they've forfeited a lot of EXP. I think TSM has done this in the past, like forfeited EXP to walk to the appropriate lane, and I think that's clearly not the right choice because if I remember correctly, they lost that game too, based on that EXP disadvantage. So I liked how you adapted on the fly in the early level one. You did get the kill on Dyrus, and you were able to get something. But it seems like moving forward, yeah, it is a little bit of a rough point. So the Gragas pick from Cali Trolls has been pretty popular. And Cali Trolls in general is not known for... He plays meta champions. He's shown some pretty solid Rumble alts, and some not so great ones too on his first Rumble game. But he appears to favor more or less conventional champions, I should say. So the Gragas pick, obviously good against Kennen for the disengage. Why are you guys picking it up? What does it bring to the table? Why does Cali like to play it?
So Gragas has been a pick we've used all the way since Challenger. There was a period where like AP/utility mage tops were really popular. Basically, Gragas and Lulu were really big. So we had a lot of success with that in the past, and it's not quite meta right now. I think it has niche uses. Why does Cali like it? It's kind of something he can carry with, I guess. Has like this solo playmaking ability, mobility, a lot of team fight. Not a lot of team fight control, but it does have team fight control. And the way he plays it is more of a burst mage assassin type thing. And I don't know if that's not always the best way to play it, but it is the way he likes to play it.
And I think that makes sense given the past with Kha'Zix and a lot of those more burst assassin type champions. It seems like he's always kind of tended towards those sort of champions as opposed to the utility mages or top laners in general.
And like I'm almost always willing to go with something that he wants to play if there's like good reasoning behind it. So most of the time I'm willing to go with like his off meta picks as long as we have a good reason and not necessarily comp built around them, but a situation where it fits into the comp or something like that.
Okay.
Makes sense.
And that works for Gragas as well as some other picks he has.
Yeah,
that
and
are not as meta.
We did see, I think, Malphite as well was another one of the picks, which makes sense, I guess, given what you've revealed to be a team fight nature of your team.
Yeah. And there's different kinds of team fighting. There's like the instant burst, like front-loaded CC and burst damage comps. Like I guess the tip game where he picked Malphite, we had like Malphite, Ori, and a bunch of other burst, which was great. And then there's like more sustained damage team fighting with like Maokai with tanks, more sustained damage, maybe hyper carries. So we try to play both. We're better at some kinds of comps than others, but we're always looking for different pieces that can fit into different comps.
So
makes sense.
Lissandra made it through your pick ban phase, which for me, as I don't know, a community person, I wasn't happy to see Lissandra make it through. I think Lissandra is incredibly powerful and she's incredibly good, but I wanted both you and John's thoughts on Lissandra and what she does right now for teams. And did you guys expect Lissandra first pick, and did you have a plan for it?
Yeah, I'll go first. Like, we know that it's obviously like a very powerful pick in the meta, and we should respect it. And like the front-loaded CC and burst is obviously the things it brings, and also high damage potentially. And we're obviously considering it, and like we're expecting the first pick. But as I said earlier, we kind of like changed around our plan kind of late, and it might have been like our plan earlier was probably more advisable. In hindsight, it's easy to say that, but in the moment, like it wasn't obviously clear to me that we didn't like, because I don't think Lissandra. It was a big part of why they won that game. So, yeah, I guess it was wrong to disrespect its power when we had perhaps a better plan.
Let's put this question, I suppose, is that was it Lissandra the champion, or was it Bjergsen? That like Bjergsen proficiency on maybe a front-loaded burst mage that was the issue. If it was a different team, would you still think banning Lissandra was correct?
I mean, Bjergsen's an amazing player, obviously, but I would rather not chalk it up to like I don't want our picks to ever rely on like, oh, this player isn't as great. Maybe if like he doesn't play certain picks, but Lissandra's a meta pick that everyone should be playing, and we should respect that. Like everyone should play it proficiently. Maybe not Bjergsen level, but we're gonna assume some kind of base level like
skill with the champion. Yeah. And obviously it's powerful regardless of what level you can play it at if it's a meta pick. John, what has your experience been with Sandra? With Dignitas EU, I don't want you to give away all your pick ban strategy.
Just one final thing. I should also say we didn't expect them to ban Morgana. We were expecting to trade certain picks, which I won't go too into it, but it didn't quite turn out that way. But yeah, the plan was flawed. That's all.
Yeah, so maybe more of just like a failure to adapt on the fly as far as changing the plan goes. Oh, that makes sense. John, your experience with the Sandra, your team. I don't want you to give away too many team strategy. Obviously, you're fighting for your spot in Challenger right now.
I think it's ban pick will do. The thing is, if you first pick at blue side, what do you take into that? If you take it first rotation on red side as well, what do you take into that? Because it's a flex. It's one of the strongest top laners and mid laners in the current meta. It's unique in that way that you can leave your solo lane until the last pick, and the enemy team needs to respect it. Because there's not many things that you can take into it. Like in mid lane right now, what can you really take that will do well against Lissandra? Like Zed can't play into it, LeBlanc can't play into it. I think Ahri's pretty decent, but are you really going to risk that, taking that Ahri when it might be going top? If you give a purple side Lissandra away, I think that you're setting yourself up for disaster. It's just there's no real way to plan around where it's going at that point. And if the enemy team then takes, say, a Lulu, which can go one of three lanes, then the enemy team is just they can play around whatever you pick. Flex picks, and it's more about the flex picks themselves being so strong right now in this meta, rather than just the champion, how strong it is. It's more the roles that it fulfills.
So with that in mind, do you think like Kassadin would deserve the same respect pre nerf Kassadin? Let's just say. Yeah,
definitely.
Pre-nerf Kassadin, depending on what's banned, like Kassadin could lane against most things pretty well.
Yeah, like look at all the AP picks that are coming out now. Like Kassadin could be considered a lane response to like a lot of the strong picks right now that are magic damage. But with that gone, there's no check to those champions.
Mm-hmm.
There's like
so it's kind of like right now it's pretty straightforward if you're taking a mid laner what you're going to do with it. Apart from maybe Cassiopeia, I mean, she's considered the flex as well. I've seen a lot of Cassio top in EU. I don't think I've seen it in NA. Correct me if I'm wrong,
I don't
but
believe so.
it's pretty much considered a flex pick in EU.
Yeah, it was actually Bjergsen played not top, but he played Cassio mid, and that was like also it was in response to Lissandra, and I thought it was really interesting that they did that, and it did make me question like, well, maybe they don't prioritize Lissandra, but I didn't expect them not to first pick Lissandra in our game. It was just a consideration. And it was interesting how they used the Cassiopeia pick in that game that they unfortunately lost, that really epic long game versus Team Liquid.
Cassio is, like, her control of areas, like, this is the same thing with Lissandra, okay? What you need to look at right now is how the game works. And most of it works off tower-based gold and getting 5 dragons or Baron, okay? So you want stuff that can push really well, or you want stuff that can fight around those areas really well. Now, Lissandra's flanks, as long as you can ward properly, Lissandra can flank around Dragon pretty fucking easy and land a good ult, you know, which can change a team fight. And the same thing with Cassiopeia. You know, her ult is like, it's the range of the lane that, or the, it's such, you know, you can hit a 3-4 man ult pretty easily if you're fighting around that area, you know. And that's one of the reasons as well, if you look even down at the bot lane, like Corki's so good right now in those sort of areas because he just shreds through the whole team, you know?
It seems like there is a huge emphasis on AoE damage and magic picks, and it makes sense. I mean, we are in like the team fighting meta. It is about finding that team fight either on your ground or in a pinch, and it seems like obviously Lissandra's very good at that. Gnar was good at that in his prime. Rumble's still very good at that. We saw Calitroll use some pretty impressive equalizers in the game. And it makes sense to me, especially that Corki would be good in that. And I hadn't even considered the Cassio pick in that same regard. We have seen her in EU, I think mostly as an answer to Aurelia in the top lane, just because, I mean, Aurelia you can't go toe-to-toe with a with a Cass early game. There's the range, she does too much damage, she's too quick. And it's interesting that you mentioned that with Kassadin gone, how rampant these AP like zone control mages could go, or any mage in general. And I'm curious, without Kassadin, is there any other answer that either of you two would be willing? Cho'Gath?
Silence. Anything with a silence has always been considered strong against, you know, long-range mages. If a Cho'Gath can get the silence off in a team fight, then the mage is pretty much screwed, you know. Right. That's why Kassadin used to be so good, and why LeBlanc used to be so good. You know, like when LeBlanc's silence got removed, you've seen how the meta changed. That's when Xerath came into the game. That's when you know, Ahri came back into the game, because these champions had received changes around that time, and they weren't being picked, you know, because Nidalee had just been nerfed, so there was no real range caster. The only one was Xerath, who had received a change, but no one was willing to touch it because, you know, LeBlanc could just get on him and blow him up, and that was it. But now, after that, people shied away from it, and they went back to the range casters. This was about a year ago as well, so the mid lane fluctuates depending on the buffs and nerfs, you know, and people don't realise how much these small changes, like, well, it's not really small. A silence is a pretty huge change, but like over
how much changing months, a single champion can change the entire face of
how much one champion changes the entire meta of the lane.
All right. I'm interested to see Cho'Gath. Matt, if you have any ones that you want to throw out there, I'm more than happy to hear them. If you want to save them.
Wait, what's this about Cho'Gath?
Whoever you're playing. John said that Cho'Gath is an answer.
Really good.
Is that he's an answer to dealing with mages in the mid lane, in a similar vein to Kassadin or LeBlanc.
It's just unique.
No, it makes sense.
Silences are unique right now. You know, what Fiddlesticks and Cho'Gath are the only ones
plus
that I can think of off the top of my head. Maybe there's one.
The sustain you get from his inherent passive
he's got
is really helpful. Silence, knock up, and AoE auto attack.
I'm ready. This could be
it. You get a Cho'Gath J4. What mage is going to survive that waiting phase? You know.
I don't know. I'm skeptical on Cho'Gath, but if Cho'Gath ever comes back, Ninja, the Chinese player, will be very happy.
I don't think it will. I don't think it will, because I don't think people know how to use it well enough to make it a meta pick. You know, like it's never been considered in that way. It's just how the kit works. You know, like if you look at the kit itself, it's strong.
The kit is strong in theory, but you would need some kind of execution with it. That's fair.
Yeah.
So.
If I could just find a final thing, it's kind of funny you mentioned Cho'Gath, because I don't think I'm giving anything away, but like Kali, our top laner, was known for, maybe not known for, but maybe among solo queue players, he was like spammed the hell out of Cho'Gath like earlier in the season. I think he actually became pretty good at it.
It makes sense. Like,
I just think it's such an annoying thing to play against.
It is annoying.
It's so annoying. Like, that's what can win games though. Like when you're playing something that's unorthodox and people like it's got an interesting mechanic, like that can win a game because people are just shocked, you know, and that's also really undervalued.
It does have that shock factor, and I think like it's one of those champs where people think they're not like they won't like respect it, and they get like a good player just hits the rupture, and the person who doesn't respect it thinks they can dodge it, and there's, oh, I'm suddenly dead.
Well,
So-
yeah, if you get hit by the rupture or the silence, you're just dead, right? In a team fight, there's just absolutely like the amount of CC he brings in his kit is like comparable to Gnar, but I mean significantly harder to land, right?
Plus, that silence is like
I
nigh
guess so.
instantaneous, right? It's like really quick.
Yeah, it's instant.
That hitbox is weird as hell. It always has been. I will say, having played a lot of Cho'Gath, but I think if you're good at it, yeah, it's like pretty impossible to deal with in close combat. All right. So moving forward, I'm going to take Matt off the spot here. Well, you're staying. I guess I'm bringing John also in. I want to talk about coaching and your guys' experiences with coaching. John, obviously, you have a pretty interesting history in that. And Matt, Teammate is the only team you've done coaching for, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So for both of you, what do you do for your teams, and how do you define your role as coach? And yeah, let's just start there.
I guess I'll go first. Well, what I do for the team, I'll define coaching, but what I do for the team, that's not how I define coaching, but all I can do is like say my experience. It's mostly just working with the team on team improvement and scrims and replay review. That's probably the bulk of it. Then also working with other analysts and assistant coach like on game planning for other teams during the week. And also working on like interpersonal relations with the players, just like, talking to them, stuff like that, checking up on them, and just talking to them a lot about the game or not about the game. So, yeah,
Building
Pretty
those
simple.
relationships up. Yeah. John, do you have a similar? What is it that you do with Dignitas EU? Do you feel like you function in a similar capacity?
I mean, it's a little bit different because I'm remote, obviously. So I would say remote coaching is you fail to influence like day-to-day things. You can only influence what happens around scrims and pre-game. Like for instance, like Matt living with the team or whatever, like it's a lot easier, because you can control the environment that they're in, what they're doing during the scrims, even with the eating, stuff like that. But for me right now, it's about finding ways and strategies to combat, behaviour issues in the game. And by behaviour issues, I don't mean toxicity, I mean habits. So, for example, if I have a player that is overextending a lot or doesn't ward enough or blah, 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 it's more analytical. And I'll have my analyst, Froscruren, and she'll tell me, blah, 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 this went wrong this game. And I'll find a strategy how to change that behaviour for them,
So you have a lot more focus on
Player development, I would say.
Player development, yeah, as opposed to, because it seems like interpersonal relationships, you don't have players interacting on a day-to-day basis, so you don't get quite that same level of interaction or have to worry so much about those interpersonal relationships just because the players only talk to each other in game. For the most part.
I would prefer that. I would prefer to be able to, influence them. And I don't mean in a bad way, but, there's a bit more authority, I feel, in physical form. Like, if I'm standing next to you, then you're going to respect what I'm saying more than what I'm saying through a screen, So it doesn't hit as hard when you're speaking over TeamSpeak or Skype or whatever to what it does in person,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just can't quite have the same level of authority. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So, John, we'll start with you on this one. How does this compare to what you did previously for coaching? I know you've worked with teams in the past.
Team-wise?
Yeah.
Previously, I was with the team before this was H2K, which was a year ago. And those guys were all, solo queue gods as such at the time. So teaching them was more just what I had to do was scout out teams, do a bit of analysis on map movements and picks to sort of put them together so they weren't just taking a solo queue team as such. And then give them maybe the first 5 minutes of the game, give them base strategies, if X happens, do Y, if not, do Z, and just develop that side. It was a little easier, I would say. But I was myself, now obviously I'm working with my analyst and I feel like it's a lot easier. It's something I wish I had invested back then, but I did take a fair amount of time out of the game. So, I was away for like 8 months between roles. So I felt like coming back into the scene, I would need someone else to sort of ease me into the meta. But I find working as a partnership, as a team, a staff team, it's a lot better than doing it on your own.
So Matt, I know Teammate's the only team you've worked with, but as you've worked with the team, has your role changed a little bit? Where you initially focused more on analysis? Have you always had a support staff behind you, or has it ever been just you?
Okay, so I guess I'll just start from the beginning. Like I started out, it was earlier last year when I would say there were way less people looking to become coaches or analysts, and I literally just asked Maple over Twitter, like, I think I knew they were looking somewhat for analysts, so I just asked, and there was a kind of a trial period where I was doing stuff with them. I did some written things and just sat in on their scrims and commented, and after a while they just decided to take me on, and soon after that they said I could move into their house and for over the last summer. And once LCS came along, I guess it was only natural that I would be the head coach after that. But for the large majority of for that entire time, like it was just in the capacity of an analyst. So I guess I would say that going from an analyst to coach, just like it happened in name, but in practice it's gradual to move from one role to another, and there's a learning curve associated too, I guess. Like I wouldn't say in the beginning either that I was like an amazing analyst. There's definitely a lot of learning just along the way, and even still.
Do you feel like it's learning as an analyst or learning to work with the team that you're doing analysis for?
A fair bit of both. Like I wouldn't say I had like a full grasp of how to play the game perfectly back then or even today, although that's what I strive for, and I feel like I move towards that all the time. But so in the game, but then also working with the players. Each team, I'm sure, is like a unique challenge. Every team has different players who are different people, and you have to respect that. You'll have different teams will work in different ways, will prefer or not prefer other things, will interact differently, respond differently. And I've only worked with one team, but still working with that team, like you need to kind of accommodate yourself to that unique situation.
Mm-hmm.
If there's an aspect of your coaching that you think you're really, really strong at, what would you say what that is? And I'm asking that as on the angle of if you could bring up a second coach, like a secondary coach, what would you want the secondary coach to focus on so that you can focus on the other stuff more? Like, is there something like you think you're better at than the other?
That's a bit difficult. I'm not sure I would say there's a strong part of what I do, but I guess I could talk. What I didn't answer in the previous question was, did I always have people helping me? No, not while I was an analyst, but since we entered the LCS and there's some subsidies for people to help and just more need, like in LCS, there's more need for more people to help with other aspects of the game. So we have like an assistant coach, an analyst, an online analyst, and 2 volunteer analysts that help mostly with game planning, but also some with team improvement too. So I wouldn't say it kind of shores up the areas where I can't like spend all my time because I'm sitting in scrims with our assistant coach. So everything that we miss or like don't have time to dedicate entirely into one area, like our online analyst David Hermes the Turtle does a really good job of like, I'm going to give you a lesson on the early game. I'm going to give you a lesson on the level 1 or on rotations or something like that. Like we're all trying to improve on it, but he really helps focus us.
Okay. Well, and that's interesting. And John, you've mentioned using an analyst, using Froskurn specifically in a similar capacity where she kind of lets you focus more on player development and she gets to focus more on game strategy or tactics.
Yeah. It's basically what you need is for someone to make up for where you're weak, and now everyone is weak somewhere. As you say, the game is constantly about learning. I mean, you can strive for perfection and knowledge of it all, but since the meta changes all the time, there's constantly changes to champions. It's all knock-on effects, and there are so many different variables in the game. It's impossible to notice every single mistake by yourself. And I've realised that. I've realised that now because when I sit with Frost and we're sitting discussing things, and obviously she's coached before, so it's not just in the sense that she'll tell me something. Like she can talk to the players like just as well and go over stuff. So it's kind of a like, you know, what do you want to do? What is your strength? Like for me, I feel I'm really good at understanding 2v1s and map movements in the first 10 minutes, how to dominate that and get your lanes ahead and blah, blah, blah. And then Frost will turn around and she'll be really good at the level 1 play, or she'll be really good at, you know, rotations and the laning phase, and it will mesh together and we can create, hopefully, will be a perfect game for the team, you know, based around this, whatever strategy we're looking to do, you know.
And it seems interesting. It seems nice to have that second person who is on a similar level of authority who can complement your weaknesses in that same way. And Matt, you said you have your primary analyst kind of does that for you. Does let you just focus on game planning, whereas he gets to focus more on like, hey, we have a weak level 1. Here's how you do a strong level 1, or it gets to give you insight into those specific issues. Do you feel like it's a similar role?
Well, to clarify that a bit, it's more like we have like weekly game planning meetings, and that's all the time I have to dedicate really game planning. And then the rest of my time is like I can watch stuff or watch our scrims, and me and our assistant coach can focus on the team itself's improvement. And yeah, our online analyst helps with both. And he'll help us focus on one aspect of our gameplay very well.
Okay. Well, that works out nice. It seems like it's working out pretty well for you. I mean, obviously a little bit of a rocky start for you guys, but you're performing very well now. And I was gonna ask, and this is definitely on my question sheet, about plans for the summer split. But you mentioned that you're kind of more focused on what's immediately in front of you. And are you guys just gonna keep going as is? Is there something you're trying to work on in the short term? What do you expect from the rest of the spring split?
Well, the rest of the spring split, we only have 4 games left. There's only so much that can change, like standings-wise, for every team, I think. So for us, I think it's probably between like we can probably finish between like 9th and 5th or 4th or something. Maybe we can finish higher than that. But like our goal is to make playoffs, and obviously we don't want to be in the relegation zone. But our goal is to make playoffs, and I think with a couple more wins, we can secure 7th for sure. We'll need maybe 2 or 3 more wins to get playoffs. So that'll be a challenge. That's the challenge right in front of us. And then I guess for the next split, we would make our goal to make Worlds, but again, it's in the future and hard to see that. Like even playoffs, if we make playoffs, is going to be a huge challenge. It would be great if we could make it.
Yeah. So, as a coach, what do you do to come back from a streak of losses? What do you do? We've seen Team Liquid recently, obviously having a very hard time getting wins despite a very strong early start. And is that something you've worked with, like that kind of the morale that goes down?
Yeah, I think Team 8, even before I was there, was a team that was really experienced in losing, and that's important. Like you obviously want to win all the time, but it's important to know how to like fall and get back up, kind of. And that goes all the way back into Challenger scene when they like lost in the round of 20 or like would keep getting beaten by LMQ in NACS. And like you could kind of describe the history of Team 8 as falling and getting back up all the way to where they are now. Mm-hmm. Like, and you could paint every team that way, but us especially, I think. So over time, I think we've gotten really good at bouncing back. We're never like super down about a game. We'll always be disappointed about a loss and like sad we could have done better, but it never like gets to us. We're never in like huge arguments. Like we've had the same roster for a very long time, and I think it shows that like that's part of the reason. And when we do lose, we don't I try to not like address it immediately because there's emotions immediately after a loss. So it's just about like getting past it, getting it out of your mind, giving some space and time until we come back and revisit like, okay, what do we do now to do it better next time, make sure it never happens again.
And that, man, I mean, I'm impressed that you feel that way. I feel like a lot of teams just tend to go on tilt and continue to lose. You know what I mean? I feel like that's a huge thing. Do you think that's unique to Team 8 in their experience of like you said, falling down and getting back up so many times? Do you think that's a thing that you've learned from experience? Do you think that's more like your team's players and personalities, and maybe that just in general they're more resilient people, and maybe they can just be more relaxed about the game?
It's hard to say. Like, I guess you could chalk it up to personality because it's not like teams that go on losing streaks. It's not like they can help losing. Like, hard to use an example, but I guess a team like Coast. Sometimes it seems like there's not a ton they could like, especially like partway through the season when you see like it's a pretty bad situation, and it's really unfortunate. And it's not like they can help how horrible their situation is that much, like as players. So I don't know how much of it to pin on our players. It's obviously our players are like resilient. That's definitely a part of it, but I don't know how to weigh it like versus like the circumstance or like we actually won like the tip game. Frankly,
Yeah.
if Tip plays it right, it could go the other way, and that our season's kind of in a way different place. So I can't say how we would have reacted from that.
But
Or
you
like even going back to complexity when we qualified for the LCS, it was a best of 5. We almost threw it back the other way, and again, it's like one instant, it could be totally different. So it's hard to say. But yeah.
I'm excited to know that about Teammate because I think one of the things that we see in NA in general is teams that are very prone to the kind of succumbing to the emotions that go with defeat or succumb to losing streaks, I guess is how I would say it. A lot of teams that will underperform in one game and it'll affect their entire season. And like you said, you know, we might not know that that could have happened to a teammate. And like there's a lot of things that are intangibles that we can never be sure of. But it seems like from what you've told me, at least, we can look forward to Teammate maybe not always being consistent, but never dropping so far as to like, you know, I guess go so how to phrase this, be so emotionally distraught as it like to get yourself on a losing streak you can't come back from.
Sure, that's fair.
So the last thing I wanted to talk about, and it looks like John has disappeared on us due to internet problems as our stream is going down due to internet problems. It's a wonderful day for the internet games and teaching a team to close games. Teammate, formerly a challenger team, obviously used to much shorter game times in the nature of challenger scene. This season that you said have been going pretty long, honestly, even with the Dragon and Baron changes. So how do you feel about Teammate's ability to close games, and how do you teach them to close games better?
So I think a large part of our success in challenger scene was like something instinctively about our team fighting and I guess just individual laning skill, like help snowball games. And like a lot of challenger games you'll see are still like that, like snowballing off laning, skirmishing, stuff like that, which we excelled at that time. And it's a bit of an unrefined way to play, and it still is. But it was a way we would win. Maybe not super consistently, but we did qualify for the LCS in that way. So in that way it worked. But once you get to a higher level, like the unrefined parts, like they get punished by better teams, and you can't just run around the map looking for picks all game and eventually win the game. Because that's what some of our play early in the LCS looks like that, and you can see how it didn't always work out. Whereas now you can see when we're playing a lot more patient. And maybe it's an error like to play too overly passive, but when you're not going for those stupid fights, you are not like it's better to err on that side.
Yeah, to err on the side of caution.
Maybe it's not necessarily better, but it's how we would correct such a problem, I guess.
It's been better for Teammate, I guess you could say.
Right.
Okay.
So other challenger teams probably struggle the same way, where they previously had won off mechanical skill or brute force of skirmishing, stuff like that. And obviously, like it's not a consistent way to win, so you'll see a lot of inconsistency in that regard in the challenger scene, or maybe challenger teams that qualify for the LCS too. But I'm not sure if there's a best example of that besides maybe us. I don't know.
So I know you watch a lot of challenger scene. We'll take a brief detour into challenger since we lost John for this question. But what are enemies looking very strong? Fusion's kind of all over the place. Who do you expect first off to come up in that 10th place spot automatically? And what do you expect? Do you expect any of the other challenger teams to have a shot in the relegation/promotion tournament?
So it's pretty like what everyone's saying and what in the results, like it's pretty clear that enemy is who most people expect to be reaching the number 1 spot in auto qualifying, knocking out Coast. So I don't think there's much debate there, and I haven't watched every challenger game to totally verify that or have an opposite opinion, but I'll just stick with that. The rest of the teams, at this point, it doesn't seem like there's enough consistency or like shining, like one team that shines through otherwise to like definitively say, for one thing, who would be second, and for another thing, if that team would even be able to knock out Dig or whoever is eighth, which is also not, we don't know who the eighth place team in LCS will be either. It could be Winter Fox. It could be a lot of teams. It could be us. It could be Gravity or I'm forgetting a team, but it's not settled.
Yeah,
But I
mean,
usually like to give credit to the LCS team. Like Dig has problems, but there's just some kind of intangible difference where I just give the edge to the LCS. I give the benefit of the doubt to the LCS team.
and I think that's a safe side to err on, especially because just in general, scrimming with other LCS teams and being on this competitive schedule is going to do so much for you as a team.
Yeah, I don't think I have a very bold opinion there.
Well, and I think that's fine. I think enemy esports qualifying is what most people are agreeing on at this stage, and I don't think, and I think it's fair that you may or don't feel like you can make a more bold statement than that. Because honestly, I can't either. I've watched a lot of the Fusion games because Nian's a friend, and I like to keep up with how he's doing, and it's an interesting. They're interesting games, and I don't want to watch them so much just to like get into super deep analytics. But it's inconsistent, and I think that one of the most important things is consistency in a team, and I think something that we've seen from Teammate and your most recent win streak obviously was that kind of consistency, and something that we haven't seen from Coast is that team now in the 10th place boss is just the complete lack of consistency. So. Yeah, I don't know. I'm excited to see what happens too. So, due to internet issues, we're gonna finish out. So we're gonna get the VOD. But basically, let's just talk IEM Katowice for a second, and if there's anything else you want to talk about, we'll go through that as well. I don't know if you've looked at the group stages yet, but if not,
I looked at the groups, yeah.
awesome. So let's talk about Cloud9 versus GE Tigers in Group A, and SK Gaming versus Yoy Flash Wolves. Cloud9 versus GE Tigers. What do you think's gonna happen?
I mean, I don't have a different opinion from everyone else that G Tigers will win, but I guess what could be interesting to talk about is what would it take for C9 to win? Like what would it take? What would it take? Like how could it happen? And
Yeah,
I don't know. I'd have to think about that before I knew to answer that, but I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on how C9 could beat G Tigers.
I just can't imagine it happening. Maybe if Lee Sin, maybe if all of the jungle champions get nerfed, and somehow Elise gets buffed, and Lee can't play. It's a pretty far off set of intangibles, and I don't think it has anything to do with what Cloud9 can do, because I think it would require GE not preparing enough for this to happen, or it would require something changing on Riot's end, as in patch notes that were particularly favorable for Cloud9. Because at this point, I think GE just outclasses pretty much every team in this tournament, and I think that as far as beating teams that are just a higher caliber, that is one of the hardest questions, and I don't think one people have rarely answered well.
Yeah, I do remember watching a set versus either Samsung or IM where GE Tigers were like on the brink of losing. Not on the brink of losing, but looking very shaky, like inexplicably.
I
I'm
think,
trying to remember like
and
what.
most recently their set versus Jin Air too, they also like
Oh right, that's it.
looked sloppy. I mean, they came back pretty well. They fought some smart team fights and made some smart picks, but like the early game was super in Jin Air's favor, and Jin Air was coming back. So maybe that has to be Cloud9's strategy, focusing on the early game. But I mean,
Do you
feel
think
like
Cloud9's even capable of doing that though?
They looked so shaky even in the last week of LCS. Like Bulls had huge he misplayed like every team fight on Lissandra in that one game.
Most of
they were really
Cloud9
they resorted to like not desperation tactics, but all they could do was split push versus tip, and that eventually failed them too. So I don't even know. It's like I always want to believe that Cloud9's the best and can be the best, but it doesn't look good.
The
right
season
now.
doesn't look good for them. I mean, most of their wins are from the bottom teams, and they lose against the top teams. So it's not. You can't even like make the argument that like they're a top 3 team right now. I think.
Who would your top 3 be? Just curious.
Right now, TSM CLG in the 3rd place is up for grabs because like Right now, teammates looking good. Tip is looking good. That's
I
about
think
it.
it's, I think it's teammate or
It's a
Tip.
toss up
I
between
think,
like
I think
for me right now. That's my top.
I think it's
4-ish
fair to
range.
put. I think it's fair to put Tip up there in top
Tip
4.
is looking
Everything
really
else.
good.
Yeah, we've practiced versus them, and yeah, they're in like just between like all their players have done well, but between Xiao and Impact, it's like the best average solo laners like by far in our region. So it's just crazy.
I'm
And even still, like you see, they'll still like all the lower tier teams, they'll struggle to close out games in a reasonable fashion. Like even against that Cloud9 game, did they give up a Baron or almost threw a Baron or something? But even still, like yeah, they're beating Cloud9, so take that at face value.
all right. You know what?
That's
On the
true.
subject of Tip, before we talk about since we're here, I want to talk about Karthus mid.
I was gonna ask that. Do you think that Xiao Xiao on Karthus is the reason why they're winning lately, or is it Xiao Xiao getting better? Like getting back more into his groove.
And I guess give your thoughts on Karthus too while we're here. What do you think of Karthus? And
First, I guess I should say like Xiao Xiao's a god.
He's God,
and
yeah,
sometimes
he's-
like not always like the mid Ezreal was sometimes sketchy of his, but the Karthus. I want to say he tried that versus us in Scrim, but I'm not 100%. Like clearly it's a pick where it hasn't been around so long that perhaps people aren't playing correctly around it. That being said, trying to remember both the games, I don't think it's the one reason they won both of the games. If who was the first opponent other than C9?
So C9 High played Zed into it, and then oh man, the second game was bad.
Or
Second
that
game-
was the second game, but the
Oh, the-
other game, yeah.
the other game.
Perhaps I'm misremembering, but
I can't remember either. I remember distinctly Impact ganking. Okay, now we gotta look. Impact ganking top lane, or sorry, they're 3-mana diving top lane and using the Karthus ult to get him a kill.
oh, Liquid, yeah.
It was
I
Liquid,
actually
yeah.
didn't get to see much of. I didn't see much of that game because we were driving back. Because that was right after our game. But it was actually the C9 game that was Saturday, and Liquid was the Sunday game. So what I understood was it was a complete stomp. I haven't gotten to it yet, but yeah, I can't tell you about Karthus in that game. But in the other game, it kind of gave them this safety measure of like there was like fairly small amount of team fighting because C9 was just being avoidant of it and splitting all game, if I remember. But if they ever did, they were like there was just so much damage, and instead of being around Baron, I almost wondered if they could just walk down mid and like dive with Kennen and Karthus and just come out ahead, and maybe
Well,
that wouldn't be safe. I was just wondered if they could.
Well,
and
that's
if
what they did. So you haven't seen the Liquid game yet, but they basically just
Okay.
walked down Liquid's mid lane. They didn't die because Liquid just gave it to them. But like basically, Liquid played super passive throughout the entire early game, and they just kept forcing like 3-man dives with Karthus ult back up and just got
Yeah.
ahead. Karthus got big, and then they just took everything, like everything.
What is for sure is that Karthus plays to Xiao Xiao's like worst or best tendencies of like almost over farming and like not overly passive, but definitely like just the farm element.
And it does
He has
seem
it down pat.
it does seem like it supports a passive playstyle too, because like even if all you do is farm in the mid lane, you can still have an impact across the map, right?
Didn't he
right.
solo kill Phoenix on Zed or something?
High on Zed.
Hi, my bad. Yeah, he like solo killed Hi, right?
Okay, I jumped into that game. All I saw was High getting shit on by a Karthus is dead, and I was like, damn, like this is a rough game.
To
for
be fair, I
High.
actually think that's a good matchup for Karthus. He's pretty good against people who dive all in on him when he takes exhaust.
For sure.
Because like he wins the LeBlanc matchup. Like even back when she had the silence, right? He straight up wins that.
I don't know.
I mean, like you have to be a good Karthus
I
player
love
to pull
Zed.
that
I
off,
love
but
playing Zed, and that matchup feels so easy to me in the garbage solo queue division I'm in that it's hard for me to imagine it being any different and competitive. But I know that like Zhao Wei's really smart, and I think smart use of exhaust would be just totally a death sentence for Zed.
it's also because Karthus is pretty fast. Like I think he has a pretty good base movement speed, and I think he outranges Zed, doesn't he?
I mean,
Pretty sure he outranges.
I mean, basically, yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, basically, because Zed doesn't have unlimited Qs, whereas Karthus does.
exactly.
Well, okay, so sidetracked on the Karthus thing to talk about teammate or TIP, Team Impulse.
Which was going back to
Which is
somehow
going
IEM,
back to Cloud9, which is going back to IEM. So G Tigers triumphing over Cloud9. Yes, the best the biggest sidetracking. SK Gaming versus Yoi Flash Wolves. We decided GE Tigers are going to beat Cloud9 most likely, except for some pretty huge intangibles. SK Gaming versus the Yoi Flash Wolves. I don't know if you're familiar with the Yoi Flash Wolves as a team. They're a very strong LMS team. Their mid laner is incredibly talented, but they've yet to prove themselves on it.
I know of them. I've never seen them play. They're most known in my mind for having a player named Maple, like us.
The god.
They have a lot of
Another
the players
player
from
named
Gamma
Sword
Bears,
Art.
right?
Sword Art, yeah. Great names, I gotta say. I love LMS names.
Steak.
Steak.
Okay, so based on player names alone, they're gonna win, right? Just because they have better
Okay.
names.
Right.
Right. I think SK is going to crush this. I'll be honest. I think SK has been looking sloppy, but I just think that the LMS region as a whole just doesn't I'm not even a big EU fan, but I feel like it's not quite there yet as far as high competitive levels.
I can't comment either way. Having never seen Yoi Flash Wolves or any of that league's games, then all I can say is about SK. Like, I can't say who I think will win, but I do think SK has vulnerabilities which are kind of known and exploitable. So if Yoi Flash Wolves is a smart team, maybe they can look to exploit that and come out ahead. And like, I'm a huge fan of Forgiven, but I think that team plays a kind of not necessarily predictable style, but exploitable. Yeah, predictable, exploitable style, which you've seen the teams that have beat them at that game.
Yeah. All right.
If I recall correctly, Reasony, one of the experts of the region, he said that he thinks Flash Wolves is really good, but he doesn't expect them to beat SK because he doesn't trust in their ability to research the team. And I'm not really sure what that means, but yeah, like you said, like SK has exploitable weaknesses, and if I guess if they can get some kind of analyst to look at SK's games by the time they play, they should be able to exploit. That's how I feel. Because I watched one game, part of the finals that they played, the best of 5 with TPA last month, and they looked pretty strong. Like, it was pretty back and forth though, but they did look like some sort of preparation team. But I only saw like one game. I'm not an expert on this team.
That's fair. I think okay. So let's theory craft. Yoi Flash Wolves gets through. They're gonna lose to the GE Tigers, right?
Yeah,
Right.
Right. So who
SK
wins out of Yoi
and
Flash
Yoi will
Wolves?
lose to GE Tigers.
Okay. Cloud9 versus SK. Just real quick. Cloud9 versus SK.
I think SK is gonna take the vote.
I think SK is going to take it too. I think Cloud9 is a smart analytical team, though. I think if anyone's going to exploit early weaknesses, it's going to be Cloud9.
Like, just because you
I
can
wanna
see the
sit-
team's weaknesses doesn't mean like high-end balls and the others are like performing well enough right now to actually take advantage of that. They're not. So
Okay. Well, Matt, what do you think?
I want to believe in Cloud9, not out of reason or logic, but I want them to pull through. I kind of root for the good teams in NA internationally, so I can like believe that our region isn't like bad, but that doesn't always happen. And like inconsistency among the top teams in the region is always kind of troubling for me to see.
Yeah, I think it's a...
Because like, who do we look up to if our hero Cloud9
that's
has
true.
fallen?
Well, we have
CLG.
TS7 of the bracket, right?
Oh my god, CLG, don't even get me started. I've been a CLG fan forever, and they're fucking
I was a
so
CLG fan for
disappointing.
one split, never again.
Yeah.
I can't go through that again.
Well, I think GE Tigers is making it out of this group. I guess the best way to ask the question is, what's the second team making out of this group? Do we think it's, I guess, Cloud9 from Matt? We think Cloud9's going to, because it's a double LM bracket, correct?
Right.
Yeah. So Cloud9 and GE Tigers going to make it out.
Sure, that's what I'll say.
Steven?
I'm sorry, ask the question again. I got distracted by.
GE Tigers and what other team are making it out of the bracket?
Oh, CJ?
No, out of Group A.
The same group, yeah.
Oh, oh,
Yeah,
SK, Yoi, or C9.
SK.
All right.
Okay.
I'm gonna say Cloud9. I'm on the Great American Hope. I've been
I
watching. it.
want Cloud9. It's not like I don't like Cloud9. I want them to do well. I'm just not like.
I'm just
I'm
ready
not
to get-
confident in backing them right now.
I'm just ready to get my my shit kicked in next week when we talk about I Am Katowice afterwards, and Cloud9 just shits the bed. So we'll see what happens. But I'll say Cloud9 GE
Well,
Tigers.
I hope for your sake I'm wrong.
Right.
I hope for NA's sake you're wrong.
Yeah,
But
me
let's
too.
talk about the other
Too.
Great American Hope in this tournament, which is TSM. Their first matchup in Group B is going to be versus Team World Elite. World Elite. Are you familiar with World Elite at all, Matt?
Aren't they kind of a joke, whether they're good or bad? Would mostly bad.
They're really
When I
bad right
asked
now, and
Kelsey
they are
Moser
very
for-
much a joke.
Okay.
When I was gonna watch some World Elite games to prepare for the show. I asked Kelsey Moser what should I watch, and she said your time would be better spent crying into a piece of paper with World Elite on it. So I did not look up any World Elite games.
Yeah, like I remember watching the very beginning of the split. I hadn't totally kept up all the way, just seeing games here and there. But in the beginning, I watched like World Elite being a very sad team with Spirit, like maintaining this delusion that he can carry on Jungle Riven or Rengar, and then it all falling apart tragically.
So, Team Solo Mid's gonna win, right? We're pretty.
Yeah,
We're
but
pretty
I
set
also
up.
I did hear that I read that World Elite is going to have a different roster actually at IEM.
Yeah, they
but I
swapped
don't
out their
know the
AD
players.
carry and the mid laner. Yeah, but I don't know the players either. So
Like I saw the names, but I don't know anything about them. Yeah.
I see even with the new players, I don't see them winning it because swapping in new players like 2 weeks before the tournament starts doesn't seem like the way you win, right?
Yeah, and maybe they don't care so much, or they just want to try it. Who knows their motivation for switching?
Okay, so let's say Team Solo Mid makes it Gambit versus CJ Entis. Is anyone going to say Gambit?
No.
Okay, all right,
I
all right.
haven't watched all of Gambit's games, but even if I did, I feel like I would say CJ. And again, that's not. I doubt that's a bold thing to say.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I wanted to see CJ do well with. Maybe I'm one of the few people who wanted to see CJ do well. Mainly, like I liked Ambition in the jungle. Maybe I'm also one of the few people who would say that, but that's not important. I just think CJ will win.
I have a love-hate relationship with Ambition. I hate him because he was bad and he fed in mid lane for the longest time. But his jungle play has been pretty good. I got to
The
give him that.
narrative of second chances, a redemption, something like that.
Yeah, some kind of all right, sure. Second chance redemption. CJ Entis. So do we think CJ Entis and Team Solo Mid are they going to be the teams that make it through? Do you think there's any chance of World Elite beating anyone or Gambit beating anyone else?
I think
Gambit
Gambit
would
may have a
have to
better
play TSM.
chance than we are. That I think Gambit could
Well-
have a chance because I think their styles mesh up well internationally.
So wait, Gambit would have to beat TSM probably, or they would face
Yeah.
each other, right?
Yeah, well, so it's a double
that'd be a
limb.
close
So
one.
if TSM and CJ Entis both win, right, then they play each other, and then CJ will probably beat TSM. I'm not 100% sure on that, but then TSM has to beat the winner of Gambit versus World Elite, which I could actually be World Elite. That's actually a really good one. That's one I'm not 100% on. Is World Elite versus Gambit.
It's just so difficult to even guess how different international teams stack against each other for me. Like without having watched all of their games, like you never know if one team actually blows another out of the water or if it's going to be really close. And like around Worlds, I have the same problem, but
Yeah, even
it's
watching
easier.
on-
It's easier to say closer to Worlds when like teams are ramping up in seriousness and like everyone's on point and stuff. But here it's like early mid season. Worlds Elite has subs or something.
Yeah,
Not everything's as settled at this point.
very true. Okay, so let's say. Okay, so let's just look IEM overall. GE Tigers, yes.
Yeah. GE Tigers.
Everybody set on GE Tigers. Who's getting second place? I don't care who came out of groups. Just who's the second best team going to this tournament? Is it CJ? Is it TSM? Is it Cloud9?
Wait, CJ won't face GE in the semis, right? If they both win their group, they'll meet in the finals, right?
Or in the quarters? You mean?
Quarters. Yeah,
Wait,
I
no,
think
yeah, in the semis. you're
There's
right,
only
Semis?
semis and finals.
Oh,
yeah.
oh, right. That is okay. Oh, yeah,
Um,
because only 4 teams make it
So
up.
yeah, then CJ should probably take second place.
Well, I think it's still is it? Oh man, I don't actually know if it's still double.
No, two teams come out of the.
Of each
I'm looking
group.
at it on eSportspedia. Two teams come out of each group. Single limb from there. Single limb semifinals. Finals.
Okay.
No kind of. It doesn't seem like there's some kind of double elimination or something like that.
I wish it was
in-
double.
in the
but
bracket.
if it's single, then we just have to hope to God that CJ doesn't face GE. If CJ does face GE, who's second place? Is it TSM? Is it World Elite? Is it Cloud9? Cloud9 second place at IEM. We
No.
can see
I-
it, boys.
I would
cannot
be
tell you.
incredibly surprised if they got it out of group stages, to be honest.
All right. Despite my constant badgering of Matt, he's committed to not saying second place without not making an uneducated opinion. Damn you and your responsibleness.
Should I? I don't know who to give the edge to. Like, if I look at current form, I guess I would just say TSM over. I would say TSM barely over the other two Western teams.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think.
same.
Yeah, I think TSM has done pretty well prepping for international events in the past. So,
But it's such a small margin that I
I also
it
just
could go
there
either
isn't,
way.
and there's also just not enough evidence either way to support 100% conclusion. So don't take this as a serious. This is like,
Yeah.
what do you think? You know,
And-
based
yeah,
on
yeah.
what you have seen.
What's also worth noting is that am I correct in saying it's best of one in the group stage?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and that just even leaves even more room for variance. So maybe there's a cheese strat and Yoey Flash Wolves wins their group or something.
Wouldn't be surprised for
Who
that.
Oh my god, I love best of ones are not a format I'm a fan of, but it does lend itself very well to some cheese. So
Especially in international tournaments, because like when it comes to league and comparing regions, I always find it hard to compare regions other than like two teams being drastically like obvious, like G Tigers, and comparing that to like Dignitas right now, right? It's obvious that one team's better than the other. But when you're comparing the top teams of each region, I think it's harder to compare without actual evidence, because I always find international events to be something like Schrödinger's cat. Because until it feels like a cop-out answer, but like until you actually see it, you won't 100% know. Given the fact that sometimes the top teams in a bottom region are just stomping, right? Because there's not much competition. And then when they go to international competition, they say they're playing like an top NA team or EU team who struggle to get to top. But that doesn't mean that they're just because like one team
the
stomped
difference
their
of
region.
and skill
Yeah, difference in skill
disparity
and relative to the games they play. That's the hard part. I mean, you compare regions to each other. So and there's also play style, preparation. Like maybe one team is just better against a top team in this region because of how they play the game, but they wouldn't beat the other teams that would. Like it's like a rock paper scissors thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, team A
Yeah,
can
yeah,
beat
that's fair.
Team B, but like Team B is the only one who can beat Team C, but A can't beat C. So it's not a transitive property. It's
I
play styles, matches, preparation, stuff like that. So
I feel what you're saying. There's
Yeah.
a lot of intangibles. It's hard
Yeah.
to be for sure.
Mhm.
And if I'm not even gonna go into what you just said with the team A and team B and team C. It's mostly it's difficult.
I made that more complicated than it needed to be.
It's kind of hard to make a point like an elaborate point like that without planning it out prior. So respect for making the effort, and I hope that someone got it. I understood for the most part. I thought it was semi-intelligible. All right, so with IEM coming up, obviously you guys have the week off. You told me that you're taking a couple days off scrimming, but back to hard practice. Do you feel like you have an advantage coming into this week, given that one of your matches is up against Cloud9?
Advantage? Well, to look at it from both sides, they are probably going to scrim like G Tigers or something. Like scrim international teams of varying levels. Probably some decent teams, better on average than NA teams, even though they mainly scrim TSM and CLG, but still, the different experience is nice, and the stage tournament experience is also good. So that's an advantage they have. A disadvantage they have is, I guess, jet lag. Maybe a lot of time spent in transit, not spent practicing, or this just throws off their schedule a bit. For us, we got to relax a bit. We're going to go back to hard scrimming, and we know what we're going to focus on in practice. So I don't think it's super different from any other week for us, except that we have a bit more time to prepare.
So 2-0 this week.
That's the goal. Like it's doable. It's definitely doable.
Yeah.
And it's
Who's your other opponent? C9.
Winter Fox, I
Winter
believe.
Fox. Okay.
You
C9
got it.
Saturday, then Winter
Got
Fox.
this.
Effortless.
Yeah, Winter Fox and C9.
Look forward to the 9-7 from Team 8 after this week, the 2-0 sweep. You may not be. I'm gonna say it because I don't have to be humble because I don't have anything to do with your team. I'm gonna say it. 9-7 Team 8. Thanks so much to everyone who watched tonight. Sorry so much for the errors. For those of you who got to catch that first half, and we'll have to watch the back half on VOD. Thank you, Matt, for coming. Matt, do you want to give any of your sponsors a shout out before we close out?
Thanks to you guys for having me on. It was a good time. Also, thanks to our sponsors, Corsair, CyberPower PC, Freedom MGN. They help us get to where we are today. And also thanks to our team and coaching staff for being cool and helping us.
Awesome. Excellent. Of course, guys, if you want to see any more content from us, check us out on @Paravine Network on Twitter. We'll have the VOD up shortly, hopefully edited up all nice and pretty so you don't see the downtime part where we talk mad smack about NA teams. Other than that, that is going to do it for episode 22. Thanks, everyone, so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.